Hey everyone, Tim from ModelKitReviews.com here, and today we are taking a look at the high-grade Universal Century Geara Zulu from Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn. Now, hopefully you've been following my build diary in this kit and have seen the progress that we made and the various modifications that we did. If not, be sure to check out the video, just the description in the video, and for those links, and to view the entire series, and perhaps find other ones. So, real quick, let's go down the list. I actually want to, before we get into the actual scoring of the kit, I do want to talk about the mods that we did, just as a refresher, just to show you what they look like. So you can remember way back in video number 1, we did the helmet texture effect with Mr. Surfacer, and I gotta say, I'm really pleased with how that turned out. Now, I've actually had to do this twice. The first time I was painting this, the wash I used, I had a little too much matte medium in there and I couldn't get to strip off, so I actually had to remove all of the paint from the helmet with some simple green, and unfortunately it kind of wrecked the texture a little bit, so I reapplied the Mr. Surfacer. But I'm really happy with it. I'm digging the fact that, you know, it gets it away from that just giant pile of smooth surfaces at the top of it. And you can kind of still see that the chest one, not as stark, probably because I didn't have to do it twice, but it is still kind of there. And again, it just breaks up that texturing. Also, the overall like paint job pieces, right? So when I was doing the, kind of telling you about the initial painting setup, I said I was going to do the inner frame parts, or at least the exposed joints, as a red steel, kind of a gunmetal. And when I was actually painting the kit and I saw all of the green pieces and whatnot, I kind of changed my mind on that, because I realized that the kit would be a very kind of monotone, almost grayish once it was done and had a flat coat on it. So what I decided to do was actually go with desert sand for all of those pieces. And when I first did it, I was really hesitant. I didn't think it was going to look all that great when I got it together, but when I started assembling the kit, I'm really happy with it. I think it blends in nicely and it gives a good contrast to the overall kit. And it's nice, I think it's actually nice sometimes to see some kind of inner frame parts on kits that aren't always dark. Everyone seems to always do them in either a dark gray or a gunmetal or something like that. It's kind of cool sometimes to see it in these lighter colors as a piece of contrast. Also, the thrusters, talked about those previously, right? So I did the wash on those, but then actually I went in and took it a step further. I took a Gundam Real Touch marker and kind of drew over it, and right when it was just about dry, I went in with a Q-tip, wiped off a bunch of the excess, and it left this kind of cool antiqued look to it. And I'm really pleased with that. So now it either looks like maybe there's some oxidization happening on the thruster itself, or maybe there was a coating on there that's worn off from the heat of use. It could be anything. Also, hey, yeah, the other thrusters too, because I realized you guys didn't really get to see these in the finished form. So there is the thruster on the foot, and I actually didn't end up putting any filler in there, or any wash, I'm sorry, because I thought that the natural shadowing just looked really good, and I love that metallic sheen when he's on a shelf and, you know, you kind of move around it, you see the metallic pieces, and it actually helps it look like, you know, there's a separate part inside of there. Speaking of separate parts, the scribing that we did, there's the finished look of it. So if you remember, we went in with a point scriber and actually carved channels around all of these pieces, because this is actually one part. And when you see it in its finished painted form with a wash in there, it really does give the appearance that those are separate parts, that those are not one giant piece of plastic, but in fact they are. Really couldn't be happier with that. And then the copper piping gives you a nice metallic look, but it's a little more muted. It's not nearly as shiny as the thrusters are, and that's okay. That was actually the exact look I wanted to go for. So, all right, well, there we have it. See, oh, also, yes, the damage on the shield itself, very, very light. And I'll talk about my decisions on that. When I was looking at this kit and I was looking at the paint job, as I mentioned, I wanted to kind of give it has a very kind of German World War II uniform look to it, so I wanted to kind of apply like military principles, or modeling principles, I should say, to this kit when I was actually working on it. And it occurred to me, I was like, well, you know, the kit itself, I was going to do a light amount of weathering. You can see there's, hopefully you can see there's a little bit of brown around some of like the edge pieces. That's oil paints that I did. I went and did a little bit of what's referred to as oil paint rendering. You see a little bit on the shield. I've got some of it on these front thrusters on the legs. Just makes it look like there's, you know, water or some other material has just been building up there for a while. And also on the bottom of the feet, slightly It's very subtle, very, very subtle. Anyway, my decision was, I was like, well, you know, when these things return back to base after a mission or whatnot, chances are you've got a team of technicians that are going through the suit, reloading it, kind of fixing up any small amounts of damage. But when it comes to the shield, I mean, what's a shield, right? A shield is a giant chunk of metal meant to deflect shots from the enemy. And they're just going to keep using the same shield until it literally disintegrates and it can't be used anymore. They're not going to sit there and repair the shield every single time. It struck me that this would be a very disposable piece of equipment. So I wanted to give it a look like, hey, this thing's been in battle a few times, and maybe it's not the same shield that was assigned to this mobile suit. It might have been one they just had on the weapons rack and threw on this suit. So the suit itself looks kind of clean. It's a little dirty because it's, you know, it's been maintained. But the shield, well, the shield has been through a couple of tours of duty and seems to be kind of like taking a little bit of damage. The same thing for the bazooka here. Now, when I was doing, I did some photo research on World War II uniforms and stuff just to get my colors, you know, as close as I could. So this was actually modeled after a real weapon used by the Germans in World War II called a Panzerfaust, or literally tank fist. And all of those, and they made hundreds of thousands of these weapons over the course of World War II. And the color that they were, the majority of the time, they were painted a color, I believe it's Dunkelgarb is the German word for it. My German is terrible. But it translates into dark yellow. And Vallejo just happens to have a dark yellow model air color that perfectly matches it. So we went with that. And then I did a yellow stripe on the front just to, you know, that kind of, this is the dangerous end indication kind of piece to it. And weathered that up so it looks slightly used. Because again, using that mentality of, you know, the suit is of a different maintenance level than the equipment that it uses. I wanted to, this thing could have been sitting in a box or something like that. So this has a lot of kind of mud packed on it, weathering, that kind of thing. A little bit more on the painting before we move on. You notice the white stripe piece on the arm. Well, again, kind of using the, just, you know, building a character around the kit, and that's actually something that's really important to me. And it's kind of cool when you can actually do that. And I think grunt suits like this are uniquely qualified for being able to do this. So I did this white stripe on the shield, as you can see, and weathered it up with a bit of sponge work to make it look like, you know, the paint's just getting worn off. And then I used the kind of, I thought about it, and I was like, well, when I was building this originally, if you went back and watched the kind of pre-final painting video I did, I actually had these shoulders reversed because the shoulder mechanisms themselves, you can actually interchange them. You can choose to have this shield on that arm and vice versa. And I thought about it, I was like, well, you know, if it was a combat pilot of some kind, they may have a preference for which arm the weapons are loaded out into. So they would want some kind of way of perhaps a visual indicator, right? So I thought, well, let's, I was going to have that over there originally, but then this bazooka was actually designed, was just clearly designed to be in the right hand. You can see because of the way that the scope sits on the top of it, it's very much geared towards the right hand usage. So I was like, well, if this was getting loaded out, how would they do it? So I was like, well, they would do like a field stripe of some kind, perhaps. So I just put a stripe on there just to kind of indicate, like, hey, this guy prefers his shield and weapons loaded out on the right arm. It just, that little bit of detail, again, adding some personality, adding some backstory to the kit. I think it really just adds a lot to it. All right. Oh, last thing I want to mention, right, the sleeves. They came out fantastic. I can't recommend enough painting these as opposed to using the dreadful stickers that Bandai insists on including with these. And I'm actually going to do a tutorial video in the future on how I did this because this kit is entirely like a non-toxic paint based. So how I did that, how you normally would see someone do this is that they would paint this entire thing white with either acrylic or lacquer or whatever it may be, put a clear coat on there. Generally it's going to be Future, that tends to be a popular choice, Future floor polish. And then they'll paint the entire thing black with a black enamel, go in with some lighter fluid or enamel thinner, and take a Q-tip and wipe off the raised areas, leaving the black in the recessed areas. I do not use enamels anymore. I've moved away from it. I don't want to have the toxic chemicals around in the air, my pets and family, and plus myself. So I figured out a way to do it using acrylics, and what I did is I used a Vallejo white to paint the entire thing. Then I went over it with a Liquitex high gloss varnish, which if you've never used Liquitex's varnishes, they're very thick, and I quite like them. When you brush them on, they go on a little too thick, but if you cut them down and spray them with your airbrush, it stretches them out, but they still maintain a lot of durability. And they are not that reactive to alcohol, and that's the key to this. So once that cured, I went and painted the entire surface with flat black Tamiya, which is an alcohol-based acrylic, and then took the Q-tip, dipped in alcohol, and wiped off the raised areas, leaving the Tamiya in the black, and then did another gloss coat once that cured, and then a matte coat. And the effect is really fantastic. You'll see the small details like the buckles and whatnot. Those were actually painted with a brush, but we'll talk about that more in a second. So again, I may actually do a tutorial video on that for those of us that prefer to work as non-toxic as possible. The alcohol trick that you can do with this is a great option for us. All right, let's talk about the mobile suit itself. I do want to actually go ahead and go through the formal scoring system with this guy, not just talk about the things I did to it. So number one, I want to talk about the looks. And we're going to go out of our standard scale of 1 to 5. 1 being the worst, 5 being absolute perfection. It can't get any better in regards to this kit. So first off, the looks of this kit. I got to go with just a straight up 5 on this one. If it's just, I mean, it just looks fantastic. Just standing there. A lot of kits look kind of boring unless you have them in some fantastic dynamic pose. But this guy, I mean, he's literally standing there. He's got his arm up. I mean, even if we took this arm and moved it straight down, it still looks good. It doesn't look as in motion or alive, but it still looks good. It has a lot of, I guess, what you would refer to as model kit curb appeal or shelf appeal. So I'm really happy with that. There's no such thing as a bad angle on this kit. When it's on your shelf, it's going to look pretty fantastic from every angle. And it's mainly because there's so much going on with this kit, especially for a high grade. The amount of detail just in this upper torso area is phenomenal. You've got the piping. If you go in and actually paint these details out, they stand out amazingly well. You've got the ammunition clips in the front, and all of these little details like this little piece here that I did the white outline on. You've got a little bit of the copper piping, showing through the legs. You've got a layered look going in there, all the way down to the feet. I mean, even the feet have a very layered kind of look to them. It's just a fantastic looking kit overall. So again, straight 5 out of 5 on that one. This is probably one of the nicest high grades I've ever built in my entire life. So let's go for the posability. Now this kit, I said when I was painting, this kit's very posable, and I was trying to paint it in a way that didn't compromise that. And I think I accomplished that for the most part. Now, I do use acrylic paints, so these aren't as durable as, say, lacquers, so I don't want to go, bouncing this around too much. So the legs, very much, I mean, you can really stretch these legs out. I did separate the front skirts, as I said. So if you wanted to get him in some pretty dynamic poses, you certainly could. But I prefer him just standing there looking tough. I think that just is the best pose for him possibly. But yeah, the arms, you can move them in just about any direction. He can just about, because that shoulder does come out a bit, he can just about reach across his chest, so you can get a pretty cool looking pose that way. If you wanted to kind of make him look like he's reaching across to either reload or take aim with his weapon or something like that. I kept him in this pose just as a way of like, maybe he's resting his arm on his ammo belt or just holding his arm back after firing, and it really was just an excuse to show off that bottom sleeve. But the posability is definitely there. The only dings I have against it, and it's a fairly standard ding against any Zaku suit, base suit, because there's no denying this is a descendant of the Zaku. The bazooka, I mean, the posability is so limiting because I've tried it on both hands. I tried it with the shoulder piece and I tried it with the shield, and in either case, it's just a really tough pose. And you can see on that hand, you've got that thing just cranked right down to its absolute max, trying to keep that bazooka in his hand. That's a tough one. So, and also you've got the head pretty much going to go up and down. Not a whole lot of side-to-side motion unless you want it looking straight up. But it's really hard to get that kind of looking down at you, imposing tilted head to the side look that works so well on other Gundams. So, I mean, just a couple of minor nits. So that's why, as far as the posability, I got to go with a 4 out of 5. It's pretty good. I mean, considering this is a high grade kit, it's not going to get much better than that. And if it does, I'd love to be surprised by Bandai. So solid 4 out of 5 on the posability. As far as like the fun of building it, the fun factor, that's up there too. This was a fun kit. It snapped together quite well. You can see, you know, we went in, as previous videos, we went in and added a lot of details with a simple scriber. But man, it is a very fun kit to build. And before I painted it, I tell you, this thing hung around for a while where I was just posing it. I was very much treating it like a toy because it's just so cool to look at. And I mean, you do have incredible posability. Or I'm sorry, not posability, but like the fun of actually putting this thing together, seeing this thing be built up. Because when you first start working on it, you can tell that what you're building is going to look really cool towards the end. You've got these front pieces, a lot of the color separations that are there. It is a blast to put together. It's a blast to actually see it come together. So for that one, I'm going to go 4 out of 5. It is pretty complex as far as high grades go, but that's something we've seen lately, and it's something we're seeing more and more, especially in Gundam Unicorn, and then also like the high grade Gundam Wing just came out, and that's a pretty complicated for a high grade as well. So that's just the direction it's going. So definitely a lot of build fun. 4 out of 5 on that one. The engineering. So this kit was very well engineered, incredibly well engineered actually. Again, for a high grade, there's a lot of detail happening, and it was coming in the sense that, like, you know, these arm pieces were just, you know, they're 2 pieces, they're separates right there. So there's a panel line that actually makes sense. That's a logical place for a panel line. You had all of these pieces are separate, so you had the collar piece, the actual stand-up collars, popping those in. Those are all separate. So there's not a ton of fixing you have to do. It was actually well engineered from the very get-go to have just you know, minimal amount of having to correct manufacturing or design problems that shouldn't really otherwise be there in a modern kit, except for down here. That story changes as soon as you get down to these shin pieces and these knee pads. For some reason, Bandai chose to go with the very old school line right down the middle of this piece. Just cut it right down the middle. And if you look at the back, they actually, you know, there's a seam line there. It's a panel line, actually, is what they've turned it into. And it meets up pretty well and looks good, right? So you get some wash in there, and you're like, yeah, that's logical. That's a panel line. But in the front, it was just a straight-up seam. There's nothing that you could really do besides just have that giant line going down the front. Whereas back here, they kind of carved the channel in and made it look like it was actually part of the design of the suit. Drove me insane. So I did have to get that, you know, worked out. Just simple glue, ran a little bit of Mr. Surfacer over just to get it, and then I had to actually go in and scribe that line again after getting all that sanding or the filing done on it. Not a huge deal, certainly not the worst offender of that I've ever built in my entire life. But I just wanted to point it out for anybody who's taking a look at this. I just want you to be aware that there is a giant seam line right there that you have to get rid of in order to really have this kit look as anime accurate as it possibly can. So I'm going to go with a 4 out of 5 on the engineering. So the overall score of this kit, well, it was a lot of fun. It was great fun to build. It was great fun to actually mod. I personally don't mind it when kits require a little bit of extra work, go the extra mile to get a lot of detail out of it. We used a pin vise to drill out some of the holes in the head. We used the scriber on the arms. We used a pin vise on these little thrusters to kind of deepen those a bit. It's just really cool stuff. I really am happy with this kit. It's inexpensive. I think this kit usually retails for around $20, maybe a little bit more depending on where you buy it from. The trick is, though, finding this kit. It can be hard to find. It seems like whenever a new episode of Gundam Unicorn comes out, everybody goes out and buys these, and then stores are out of stock for what seems like forever, and then they'll just appear. There are other versions of this kit. There's the Guards type. This is the standard grunt suit. The Guards type has spiked shoulder pads, and they have you actually putting stickers and lining on these the edges of these panels, which I chose not to do on this because it is a grunt suit. But yeah, I highly recommend this kit. For a high grade, it's fantastic. It's a rather large high grade as well. The RX-78-2, which if I was smart, I would have had here, so I use a size comparison, but only stands up to about here in this guy, so he's pretty large. But that's actually pretty normal. We've seen that with suits in Gundam Unicorn in that line. Those are large suits compared to the Granddaddy Gundams and a lot of the Gundams from the 90s series. So there you are, going to go with an average of 4.25 out of 5 for the final score for the high-grade Geara Zulu. I hope everybody enjoyed the review. I hope everybody enjoyed the build diary for this kit. Definitely lots more to come, so please comment, subscribe, tell your friends. We've also got a lot more Gundam parties, as usual, coming down the pipes. But definitely go out, give this kit a shot. It is such a fun build, and it's such a fun kit to paint, especially if you really want to do a grunt suit and come up with different color combinations and whatnot. That's what grunt suits are all about. You could buy 5 versions of this, five copies of this kit, build them all, and every single one of them can be modified or painted to look like a completely different variation of it. So anyway, that's it, guys. Until next time, we'll see you later.